The acrid scent of smoke and scorched earth clawed at Frank's throat as he clambered back from the brink of death. The kamikaze drone had crashed with a cataclysmic fury into the building, raining debris and destroying the motorcycle. Its violent descent rattled his mind like a strip of firecrackers. He took a moment to survey the wreckage that littered the trench, metal shards and charred remnants of the motorcycle scattered like broken dreams in the twilight of a dying city. The ruins loomed around him, a jumbled mess of concrete and steel, twisted and mangled by the ravages of war. "Charlie," he murmured, his voice a ragged whisper. "We need to move." The urgency of their situation pressed heavily on his chest as he thought of the enemy lurking somewhere in the shadows, poised to strike again. Charlie had already slipped into the street, instinctively finding refuge behind a large slab of concrete that jutted from the rubble like the jagged teeth of some ancient beast. Frank's heart raced. He could almost feel the pulse of danger thrumming in the air. He shifted through the crates in the trench, his fingers brushing against cold metal and forgotten supplies. Finally, beneath a tangle of old radio equipment, he uncovered a treasure trove of claymore mines. Over a dozen, their lethal promise wrapped in dust and despair. The weight of them in his hands felt like a lifeline, a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. "Do you hear that?" Charlie's voice broke through his thoughts, sharp with alarm. Frank looked up just as a low rumble echoed through the desolation. The sound rolled off the ruins, vibrating in his bones. It grew louder, a monstrous roar that sent a chill skittering down his spine. "Here they come." Charlie's eyes darted back to Frank, the urgency palpable in his tone. Frank grabbed a handheld radio from the crates, the cold metal a reminder of the fight that lay ahead, and tossed it up to Charlie. "Take this," he yelled, his voice steadying despite the chaos. The ground trembled beneath their feet as enemy vehicles barreled toward them, engines howling like beasts unleashed. The road behind them shuddered with each violent turn of the wheels, the sound echoing ominously in the narrow confines of the trench. Frank's pulse quickened as he snatched a claymore from the crate and set it up, adrenaline coursing through him. Without a moment to lose, he leaped from the trench, his heart pounding as he raced across the street. He crashed through a gaping hole in the wall of a nearby store, the acrid smell of burnt wood and gasoline suffocating him momentarily. As he crouched low, the enemy convoy surged into view, a monstrous procession of metal and death. An armored personnel carrier led the charge, its hull gleaming ominously in the dull light. Behind it, a jeep roared forward, flanked by another armored carrier. Soldiers dismounted, their boots thudding against the ground as they advanced toward the trench, intent on inspecting the wreckage of the burning motorcycle. Peering through the shattered glass of the store, Frank's eyes met Charlie's, who had taken up a vantage point in the second-story window of a nearby building. Charlie was positioned just above the jeep, his silhouette stark against the smoky backdrop of destruction. A sudden rush of heat blasted through the air as Frank slammed the claymore detonator 3 times. The explosion that followed was a cacophony of sound and fury, sending shockwaves through the ground. The mine erupted beneath the stack of crates, the ball bearings bursting forth like a swarm of angry hornets, tearing into flesh and metal alike. The world erupted into chaos. Debris filled the air, the sound of shattering glass and crumbling concrete mingling with the agonized cries of the soldiers below. Frank watched as the viewports of the nearest armored vehicle shattered, trapping the occupants inside, paralyzed by fear and confusion. With a surge of determination, Frank burst from his hiding place, weapon raised. The deafening roar of gunfire erupted from him, each pull of the trigger a desperate prayer for survival. The soldiers inside the armored carrier responded instantly, slamming the door shut, desperate to escape the onslaught. Before Frank could catch his breath, a massive explosion rocked the street, the flaming wreckage of the jeep plummeting from the sky to crash down atop the armored carrier, a smoldering mass of twisted metal and shattered dreams. Just as victory seemed within reach, a hail of bullets erupted from the second armored vehicle. The deafening sound rang in Frank's ears as he dove for cover, feeling the sting of debris as it rained down around him. "Stay low, stay low," he whispered to himself, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He scrambled toward the flaming remnants of the jeep, desperate to shield himself from the relentless barrage. But the enemy was relentless. The armored vehicle backed away, laying waste to the buildings surrounding the intersection, a tempest of destruction that threatened to swallow him whole. Frank's heart raced as he rolled to the side, narrowly evading a volley of bullets that whizzed past him, singing the air with their deadly intent. The trench beckoned, a gruesome sanctuary now filled with the lifeless forms of enemies, their blood staining the ground in a grotesque tapestry. Frank crawled through the carnage, the weight of his situation sinking in deeper with each movement. Suddenly, the radio strapped to his vest crackled to life, Charlie's voice slicing through the chaos. The western outskirts. Static crackled as he yelled, urgency tinged with desperation. Frank's pulse quickened. He had to act fast. He rummaged through the bodies, fingers brushing against a smoke grenade, miraculously unscathed from the blast. With a surge of hope, he tore the pin and hurled it toward the armored vehicle. The grenade hissed through the air, enveloping the street in a shroud of thick, choking smoke. Frank felt a glimmer of relief as the dense fog rapidly consumed the intersection, obscuring him from sight. He dashed from the trench, heart racing, legs pumping as he sprinted down the street, smoke swirling around him like a cloak of safety. Bullets zipped past, each crack a reminder of the peril he faced. He turned a corner just as the enemy began to regroup, their shouts lost amidst the din of chaos. As he slipped into the shadows of a ruined warehouse, Frank paused to catch his breath. The walls were crumbling, blackened with soot and punctured by the scars of battle. Here, amidst the remnants of a forgotten world, he felt the weight of uncertainty settle on him. Would this be his sanctuary or his tomb? Night crept in, the fading light casting eerie shadows that danced across the debris. Gunfire dwindled to a distant echo, and in that fragile silence, Frank could only hope that Charlie had managed to escape. The western outskirts, the thought wrapped around his mind like a lifeline. He had to believe in the mission, in the possibility that the map could change the course of this war. As darkness enveloped the city, Frank steeled himself for the impossible. He was just a cog in a machine, a wheel spinning in a relentless cycle of survival. But he held on to the hope that, against all odds, he might just emerge from this hell. Frank plunged deeper into the belly of the ruined warehouse, the shadows swallowing him as he navigated through the debris-strewn interior. Each step echoed in the silence, the remnants of a once thriving space now transformed into a tomb for those caught in the crossfire. The air was thick with the smell of rust, decay, and the lingering scent of gunpowder, a visceral reminder of the violence that had unfolded just outside. As he crept further in, Frank's heart pounded against his ribcage, the sound drowning out the distant shouts of the enemy. Piles of debris and shattered machinery loomed like sentinels in the dim light, casting jagged shadows that danced ominously across the walls. He stepped carefully over the lifeless bodies of fallen soldiers, their vacant eyes staring blankly at nothingness, forever caught in the moment of their last breath. Each face was a haunting reminder of the fragility of life in this hellscape, and he felt the weight of their loss settle heavily on his shoulders. He pressed onward, deeper into the warehouse's labyrinthine depths, until he stumbled upon a small concrete room tucked away in a corner. The door hung ajar, creaking eerily as he pushed it open. Inside, the darkness enveloped him like a shroud, but as his eyes adjusted, he made out the outlines of stacks of wooden crates, a dusty radio, and a gas lantern sitting forlornly on a weathered table. In the corner, a scene of horror awaited him. A dead soldier was tied to a wooden chair, a burlap bag obscuring his face. The stark reality of the situation sent a shiver down Frank's spine. He approached cautiously, compelled by an unshakable curiosity mixed with dread. The soldier's body was lifeless, limbs slack, the ropes binding him a cruel testament to a fate he couldn't escape. Frank's gaze fell on the soldier's front pocket, and without thinking, he reached in and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. He held them for a moment, feeling the small weight anchor him in this grim reality. Instantly, a flashback surged through his mind. Rodriguez, his friend and comrade, discovered lifeless and tied to a chair in an abandoned bunker, a grotesque display of brutality left by their enemies. The image was seared into his memory, a vivid tableau of the merciless horrors of war that haunted him still. He shook his head, desperate to dispel the images that clung to him like a ghost. There was no time for grief, not now. He couldn't afford to be distracted by the past. Taking a deep breath, he settled against the cold concrete wall, positioning himself across from the soldier in the chair, the burlap sack suffocating its soul. The dimness of the room deepened as dusk approached, swallowing the last remnants of light filtering through the warehouse's broken windows. This small back room felt like a sanctuary, albeit a macabre one, and Frank allowed himself a moment of respite. He fished out a lighter from his pocket, the small flame flickering to life as he lit the cigarette. The first drag sent a rush of warmth through him, a fleeting comfort amidst the chaos that surrounded him. As he leaned back, the exhaustion of his harrowing escape began to settle over him like a heavy blanket. Each inhale of smoke blurred the edges of his thoughts, the nicotine wrapping around his senses like a soothing balm. He took another drag, savoring the momentary peace it brought, even as the weight of the world bore down on him. The warehouse groaned softly around him, and the shadows danced in the corners of his vision. As the haze of smoke curled upward, Frank's eyelids grew heavy. Despite the horror of his surroundings, the relentless fatigue pulled him under, and he surrendered to the darkness, the cigarette still clutched loosely in his fingers. In that moment, surrounded by echoes of the past and the specter of death, Frank drifted into an uneasy sleep, the world outside fading away into silence.